Good morning, Penny Ashton.
Good morning, Pat Britton. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing all right.
You all recovered? You recovered?
Yeah, I never got it. So our following the science, for people who don't know, I had an incredibly selfish person visit their family in Invercargill. And the reason I call them selfish, I don't cast any aspersions for people who catch COVID. It's a thing, but they came back from Invercargill after being with their family of anti-vaxxers for a week, talking about how all their family caught tonsillitis, and then they decided to come back to my house.
Yeah.
So yes. So then they were very much isolated, and then eventually they went back to their family, and since then are no longer part of my house.
All right. Well done.
But we followed the science, and luckily, because we followed the science, well, maybe not luckily, because we followed the science, no one else got it.
Well done.
So listen, let me just say, this is completely off track, but I should actually bring it up. I was a bit frustrated over the weekend, and I'll tell you why. Talking to Dr. Michael Baker last week, he was talking about how Southern was in a little bit of a spike right now. The government comes out and makes a change about open air events being okay, and then this was the Highlanders game on Friday night.
Yeah. Yep, and I'm annoyed about the vaccine mandates lifting before everyone's boosted. I'm like, you've got the framework in place, use it to make sure enough people don't die, just for a little bit longer, incorporate boosters into it. Yes, it's going to be a bit of a bitch, but just do it and save people's lives. So I was a bit annoyed too. Yeah.
So there was utter trash being played on the field by the Highlanders on Friday night. But actually, looking into the crowd, honestly, this is called the Zoo. For people who don't know, Dunedin, it's a very, very good initiative by the rugby family, whatever they're called, the Highlanders. They have a sector of the ground down the end, which they call the Zoo, and it's where all the students go. And they have their own DJ that gets their own music, and they just jump the whole time. You know, on a normal day, it's amazing. It's great. It brings a massive atmosphere, but it's like within hours of their being able to, and we're under a roof, so I don't know how quite the stadium gets away with not being an indoor location. But obviously they consider it a gazebo or something rather than being indoors.
Right.
And there probably were 4,000 students there. And I saw 3 masks. 2 of them were being worn as chin diapers, as the guys from South Park say. And one of them was on amongst a whole lot of them. And I just I don't want to be a killjoy, and I know this has been going forever, and we want our freedoms back and all that kind of stuff. But Michael Baker said to us either last Thursday or Friday that Southern, and that's basically Oamaru across to Queenstown South, is in the peak right now. Well, then it was right now. Hopefully it's traveled down a bit since then. And so within 24, 48 hours of being in a peak, thousands and thousands and thousands of people together, maskless, on top of each other, as you saw from that image. So,
and I'm frustrated too, because it feels like they're bending to criticism to me. Like, they have followed the science up until this point, but just this particular point, and it's like, people are sick of it, but that's your job as the government to keep people alive. So I'm with you.
Yeah. Okay, so let's say good morning to George. George is working, beavering away in the background there. G'day, George.
G'day, mate.
Am I allowed to say beavering? Is that cultural? Is that appropriation of the animal kingdom? We're going to talk a bit about appropriation today.
Beavering
Canada, yeah. It's Canadian culture. I did think, I'll show you, this is the thumbnail for today's episode, and the thumbnail uploads every episode on YouTube so people know what we're kind of talking about. And I did actually ask George about this thumbnail. So we might talk, we're talking about the horrible, the gutting story of Taylor Hawkins over the weekend. We might talk about Elon Musk and the calls for some from him to buy Twitter or start his own platform. And we're going to talk about NFTs. And NFTs are an interesting new way of exchanging items. It stands for non-fungible token. And this is one, but one of the aspects we want to talk about is this one here, is cultural appropriation. And as I was putting this thumbnail together, I had to check with George. So if I'm wrong, George gets the blame. Am I culturally appropriating this to put as a thumbnail to talk about cultural appropriation? I got stuck in a bit of a mousetrap there, going round and around and around, because I'm using it for this episode. So hopefully I'm not.
An Indigenous artist, that one?
I'm not entirely sure, to be honest.
I think that's the thing.
So I might actually be an evil user of the thing we're about to talk about in general, but we'll see. So yeah, we are going to talk about Taylor Hawkins, and that's really, I guess, just a reflective conversation. I mean, people who have been following my podcast for a while know that I'm the hugest fan of the Foo Fighters. I talk about them all the time. I'm devastated this morning. I spoke to a few muso friends, some who are quite high profile. None of them wanted to come on and talk about it because they're like, it's just happened. And a couple of them who are starting new bands didn't want to be seen to sort of go, oh yeah, that's a terrible death. By the way, buy my new album. So it's all fine, but I do want to acknowledge it and talk about it a bit later on, show a couple of videos, etc. Yeah, and also maybe the Elon Musk free speech Twitter conversation as well. But we're going to start with talking about NFTs, what they are. So if you don't know what NFTs are in general, this is be quite a good conversation to hook into. We're going to talk about what they are, and we're going to talk about one of the big concerns at the moment that was raised by, well, not raised by Paul Moon, but I saw Paul Moon talking about it, Professor Paul Moon, talking about who owns the imagery, especially if it's imagery of real people, if it's imagery from the past, if it's Indigenous imagery, who owns it, and how do we do that? So we've got a guest coming up who's going to be having a chat with us. He is an Indigenous artist and photographer, a Māori artist and photographer, and we're also going to be having a chat in a sec with Dr. Olivier Jutel from University of Otago. Actually, explain to us, George, because you kind of work with him. He's we call him an expert in NFTs, cryptocurrency, that kind of world. I'm not saying I know why we're talking to him, but explain to the people why we're talking to him.
Olivier's been researching online communities and the politics of online communities. I guess that's his sort of expertise in the media studies department there at Otago. And so, yeah, NFTs and cryptocurrency are sort of, I guess, episodes in that arc of online communities. He sort of started with looking at Obama and then Trump, and his recent obsession is cryptocurrency and NFTs. The politics, yeah.
So this is a pre-recorded conversation. So Penny, you get to chill and have a cup of coffee or something for a while.
Yeah.
But Olivier kind of looks at the maybe he looks at the academic sense of what it is. Once we've finished this conversation, I'll give you the 9-year-old boys version of what they are, and then we'll move forward in this conversation and have a look a bit more at how companies are using them, how we protect Indigenous rights, and then we'll go on to the other stuff. So if everyone's cool with that, let's play this, and Penny will have a chat again in 7 or 8 minutes about what you've heard OJ say on NFTs. Here we go. And joining us from the University of Otago, Dr. Olivier Jutel. Good morning, sir. Welcome back to the show. Two-time contributor. You get a little badge for that.
Appreciate it. Let's mint give me a little NFT, a little micro ether coin for the honor.
Well, speaking of giving you an NFT, coming up shortly, we're going to have a look at how some businesses are using them. And there was an example that I found over the weekend. Mark Cuban, who was the owner of the Dallas Mavericks, talks about what they do. Well, so we'll have a look at that, about how they're using it, because they do kind of give them away. But we kind of need to set this whole thing up with talking about what is an NFT for people who don't know. And then we're going to have a whole investigation for the next 15, 20 minutes as to what it means and how they work. So are you able to set up for us what is an NFT?
Sure. So I would say, and I can come back to this, they're essentially a way to make the Ethereum blockchain have more speculative uses and more liquidity, because there's a lot of rich guys holding a lot of coins, but there's not a lot of essential value to this overall sort of pile of dead capital. So they need some money churning and circulating in this space. And NFT has been since mid 2021, the mechanism that they think is going to kind of get them there. But essentially, if I'm an artist, and I want to be kind to a lot of my precarious artist friends, and I understand they've been approached like, hey man, try this space, maybe there's some stuff for you there. And so I don't begrudge anybody from dipping their toes in that kind of stuff. But essentially, if I've got an image or a collection, and actually the funny thing about the collections is so much of the punks or the Bored Apes or the fluffs are just like auto-generated sort of like video game template stuff. Like it's maximum low effort, in my humble opinion, crap. Now, I know there's some serious artists there, whatever. Shout out to them. But basically, I've got an image, and if I want to get into the marketplace and speculate and sell my collection, all the rest of it, I got to buy Ether. Okay, so Ether is the kind of the cryptocurrency. It's different to Bitcoin because you can launch your own coins, you can launch so-called smart contracts and other applications on that blockchain. But the key thing is you're all trading in Ether and gas. So I've got to come up with roughly, and of course it fluctuates, but the transaction costs of minting an NFT on something like Engine is probably around $200, depending, give or take. And what happens is people think, oh, my little bunny picture is going to be like in the sort of like the blocks of the blockchain, and really all you're getting from Forge or any of these other NFT minters is like a number, a serial linking to a particular part of the blockchain, but it's not like that your picture's actually on the blockchain. Then you can go.
Where is it? Where is it? I like a part of this conversation, Olivia. Look, with respect, I like being the dumbest person in the room, but this is like, I have a really simple explanation as to what NFTs are. They kind of make sense in my head. But a lot of what you're saying is kind of going over my head, and I'm going, what does this all still mean? I'm still not actually understand. I kind of understand my explanation, but I don't really understand your explanation. So
Okay.
What do we actually, what is it?
It's so infuriating because if you don't come up with all that stuff, the blockchain people will tell you that you're a noob and you're a dumbass. You don't understand the wisdom of the space. And
okay,
it is.
I'm a noob and I'm a dumbass.
No, which is good. The first knee-jerk reaction should be that this is like taking JPEGs, which should be free and distributed and can be copied, and that's the virtue of the internet, and privatizing that with a stupid little blockchain brand or serial number that has no essential value unless you believe that blockchain is a new religious form of technology that's going to take over everything, which shouldn't, because it's really impractical technology. But if it did, it would be the most dystopian thing where, like I say, everything would be 0.x ETH, and everything is privatized and highly proprietary, and a kind of nothing but microtransactions all the way down. So that would be hell on earth. But people are into this because a lot of the kind of Ethereum blockchain religious types are telling you it's the new $1 trillion thing. You're going to get rich, but also it's about community. And really, there's super limited applications to your little kind of furry avatar. Like maybe you can go into like a kind of Club Penguin style hangout, and maybe sometimes there are actual like little fluff parties or whatever. But that future is not really being built. And it's just a way, like I said, to get more liquidity and speculation into the Ethereum space so that all the big coin holders can actually have some cash.
Yeah. So the way it feels to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that it's basically a Ponzi scheme on a lot of levels, whereas those who got into it early are making money on it. But people who are looking at it now going, oh, maybe we should get in, maybe we shouldn't, maybe we'll see what's going on. They're not going to make anything like that. And that's why people are saying, I'm seeing adverts on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter about saying, come and buy an NFT. Look, I got an NFT and it increased 1,000%. It's like, maybe that's true when it was the first 6 months of this happening, because there was a trend around this is cool and hip and let's get into it. But it feels a little bit, even though it's not Bitcoin, like Bitcoin, at some stage it's just going to crash, because what you're basically trading is zeros and ones. And zeros and ones on a server somewhere. As soon as you post that somewhere or put it up somewhere and say, look at someone can then just screen grab and they've actually got an image of what you've got, and therefore you don't own it exclusively
Right
anymore.
clicker.
Yeah. So, but it seems to be.
You got it, Pat. You nailed it.
Yeah.
And that would be on where the conversation starts. But there is a lot of important people. Your Mark Cubans of the world. Your oh my God. And like people like, okay, so you say it's a Ponzi scheme. Absolutely. The whole subculture around it is like hodl, buy the dip. We're all gonna make it. Like, you know, or Matt Damon is literally coming out telling you to be like a brave explorer and go against the tide. And it's all just sort of like psyching you up to get in, to be on the frontier, to not miss out, FOMO. Like the whole subculture around this is based on getting, you know, idiots, getting marks into the tent and then pulling, you know, the rug pulls and all the rest. And you got people like Gary V, who's this weird sort of hype influencer, sort of promotional self-help guy who's in on this kind of stuff. I mean, you have
which actually that actually raises an interesting question. You are not allowed to influence your followers to buy stocks if you own stocks in that company. So for a Beyonce who might own shares in Apple, to get onto her platform of tens of millions of people and say you should buy Apple now, that's actually an illegal thing to do. But you're allowed to do it in this. It's unregulated and it's the Wild West. And I said Ponzi scheme before, maybe even a better understanding is a pyramid scheme, that those at the very top might make some money of it. I will say one thing, Olivier, before we head off, and thank you, is that I agree with you about some people getting in there, but there is an aspect of this which is, I think, community. And the example we'll give with Mark Cuban shortly is how the Dallas Mavericks are using them as free giveaways, and they're not charging for them. So I wonder if eventually it'll move in that direction and away from the 12 cents, $20, $200, and they will be kind of collectibles, for want of a better word. But who knows?
The NBA Top Shots, they've been, I guess, trailblazers. I hate using that kind of language, but they've been out there in terms of, you know, you can buy the NFT of a particular highlight that you like. But what is so interesting and I think positive is that where there is a community, not just like a bunch of people coming to like my talk about the pyramid scheme and here's how you can get other people into your MLM or whatever, is like the gaming community, the gamers, bless them, hate this shit because they've already been ripped off with I don't really know gaming, but loot crates and all the sort of add-in paying for the skin economy, all this other bullshit has really soured what is a pre-existing sort of digital community, i.e. gamers.
But that's the point. That's the point. The community is not the NFTs. The community is Mavericks fans. And this is just an addition to that community. Hey, we are going to have to take off, Olivier. Dr. Olivier Jutel from University of Otago. Thanks for joining us today. We definitely want to get you back when we're maybe more diving deep into things like cryptocurrency and get your thoughts around that. But we appreciate you expanding on this a little bit today and helping us understand NFTs.
Really quickly, no one in New Zealand media is giving this the proper scrutiny. Everyone says, oh, the line's going up, it must be good. So I really appreciate you giving a platform to these pretty obvious sort of critiques.
Look, I just kind of feel maybe I'm a 60s dad, but when you start to invest in things that don't have a physical, tangible ability to hold in your hand, you need to have some kind of concern about that. And that's why I think New Zealand traditionally, to our detriment as well as our credit, have liked to invest in property. If the property market crashes, I've still got the piece of land and the bricks and the mortar, and it's a physical thing. This is the antithesis of that, if that's the right word. It couldn't be any more not a real item, it being zeros and ones making up an image that's stored on a server somewhere in the cyberverse. So, look, we thank you for your time, and we'll definitely get you back on.
Peace.
There you go. So you're all clear now, Penny? We wrap that all up? No problems at all?
God, it was so funny. Like the Ethereum. I was like, what is the Ethereum? And fluff parties. It sounds like porn. But I did look at fluff parties, and fluff parties are from New Zealand, it seems. Brooke Howard-Smith. He's the number 5 selling NFT person in the world and raised $1 million for Auckland City Mission. So that's quite good. But nonetheless, somebody at this party said, we're here to unfuck the world House prices are going to crash, but fluff is unstoppable.
Let me explain now for people who want to know what an NFT is. We've just had it explained, but I think about it in a much more simple way.
Please do. Please do.
NFTs are like baseball cards, but they're only singular individual digital baseball cards. So I used to collect basketball cards. I've still got some of them that are 30 years old worth a lot of money. Thanks, Shaquille O'Neal. But imagine you got a baseball card and there was only one version of that baseball card and it was digital, right? That's it. So there's only one of them. There's no other ones, but it's digital. Imagine a Banksy painting, the original Banksy painting, but there's just one of them and it's digital. That's what NFTs are. So
yeah, but what is with the blockchain and the Ethereum and all that seems so intrinsically wound up in it? Is that just like paper?
I think what Olivier was trying to exemplify at the start there is that it's more than that they're baseball cards. This was created as a way for the top dogs in cryptocurrency who have a whole lot of imaginary money that it doesn't have practical use to find a practical use for all the money they had to therefore make more money and continue the cycle. I think was the point there at the start. And Ethereum is basically a cryptocurrency. Yeah,
a currency.
I was just reading this spin-off article while I was also listening to that. And it sounds like Brooke Howard-Smith is a complete evangelist for it and was screaming, and they had a party and people are there dressed up as fluffies and things. And but I'm like that too, like with Sims. Like I was like, what are people spending money on bloody buildings and Sims?
Well, Sims is a game.
Skins in video games because my husband likes to play it. And I'm the voice of two monsters in Path of Exile. Which is a huge online player game. So, and that's all about the additional, because it's free to play, but it's all about the stuff that you buy. And also you can farm things. You can make money through farming things in video games. I don't really understand a lot of that.
Penny, I remember in my day, we used to go down to the dairy and put 25s and play out Pac-Man. I get it. Hey, let's also have a look at how businesses are using NFTs. So I mentioned Mark Cuban in that conversation. Mark Cuban, of course, most people know him as from New Zealand as a very rich man who's on a television show called Shark Tank. In this weekend's episode just gone, he actually talked about NFTs and he explained what they were in one or two sentences. But when I looked him up, I actually found a little clip of him talking about how one of his companies, he owns the NBA team, the Dallas Mavericks, uses NFTs, and they're not using them to make money. They're using them as a collecting thing for their fans. So just have a listen to what he's got to say about it.
And so what we ended up doing was, we're a partner with Ticketmaster, and if you buy a ticket and you scan it at your game by the end of the first quarter, we are going to automatically create a wallet for you if it's not already created when you log into your Ticketmaster account, and you'll see an NFT from the Dallas Mavericks there. And what's happening is people are starting to collect and trade them, and we've done no promotion on it whatsoever. So people who want to are selling their NFTs for more than they paid for the ticket, And so, I just want, for me, NFTs in terms of collectibles fall into two categories. You're selling them because you want to make some money from it, and that's not a bad thing, but most people are going to fail at that. It's hard to get enough of a market to sell an NFT.
There you go. So even though there's still a financial aspect to the NFTs that the Dallas Mavericks are doing, the Dallas Mavericks aren't making the money off that. They're basically, that's where they do become kind of like baseball cards. Imagine walking into the stadium and going, thanks for coming. Here's your Dallas Mavericks unique baseball card, and as you walk through, and then you've got a one of one, and then you can trade it and sell it and do whatever you want with it. Like, it's like not that they're one of ones, but kids who are trading the All Blacks
and the cards. Exactly. Yeah. So maybe people are going to the games more than they would if they didn't get a free NFT.
Yeah, but they're not. The difference is the All Blacks cards, there's tens of thousands of each one. That's the difference. There's one of one of these ones. Yeah. Now, but one could still argue, I guess, there is that it's still about finances, because he's already saying that even though the Mavs aren't making money off it, people are then getting them, or maybe they're making money off it secondhand. People are getting them for free and selling them for more money. So that maybe may draw people to come into the games to get an NFT to then basically see a free game. So there's still a financial advantage potentially for the Mavs, but maybe not directly, is what he's saying. This conversation goes on because one of the big elements within the NFT world is how are Indigenous arts and how are copyrighted images protected? This was a post by Professor Paul Moon over the weekend on his LinkedIn page. He showed this image and he says, quote, "Who owns this image? The answer is complex, and at present there is very little protection for Indigenous groups who wish to assert some control over such images. Maybe New Zealand could propose an international Indigenous intellectual property treaty to protect Indigenous IP." So that question's now being raised, I guess, like any art, whether it's a Native American headdress and Victoria's Secret, or whether it's a bunch of zeros and ones that make up basically a JPEG. Who owns it? Where does the money go? How do we protect? I guess basically, I mean, I do think about Indigenous rights, and I understand that concept, but I still think about it kind of like copyright. This person or this group of people own this, whatever it is, this design, this element. I guess there's another layer on top of that as well. And there was a story in One News about it a couple of weeks ago about then kind of Māori iconography being used and sold as NFTs. I guess we should just say Indigenous, because I'm sure it's happening all over the world, that don't represent or are made by Māori, but then their likeness is being used to make money for someone else.
Yeah, I mean, copyright can expire, but cultural appropriation does not. I often find that, technology always leaps ahead of ethics, and ethics is always struggling to catch up with
the show. Sorry, my bad. Keep going.
Yeah, no, I was saying that technology always goes first, and then ethics struggles to catch up, and that seems to be what's happening. And cultural appropriation is a relatively new concept, as being seen as bad, not a new concept. Like there's Kia Ora orange juice. When I got to the UK, I was like, what is that? It's Kia Ora, it's orange juice, and it's crows are the mascot for it. And you just like, I was generally like, what the fuck is this? And it was like this huge, I don't even know if it's still sub. It was one of the most famous cordials in the UK. So that's bullshit. What are they doing that for? It just makes no sense. But it's like, it is something that requires attention, and also just requires all of us to have a brain shift and just realize that shit's not cool anymore. Never was.
Let's do a few of the comments that have come in, and then we'll go to Te Rāwhiti Toa, who is the artist we're talking to in a minute, or I'm talking to. It's another pre-record. But Jason says the dumbest thing you can screenshot an NFT and then mint that screenshot and boom, new NFT. NFTs are the worst thing to happen to the world since Trump won the election. We've also got LB23 says an NFT will have a date come with it. If you have a later date of the same image, well, it's not worth anything. It's an obvious clone. People apparently pay for the exclusivity. So that's like, is it a first edition book? Or is it a first edition or first release NFT? People are wondering what the hell we're talking about. I understand that. LB also explained to other people in the chat that we're talking about NFTs.
I like that. Sorry, NFT equals Gen Z Amway.
On there. Yeah, there you go. So what we'll do now, and LB also mentioned, LB called it Patception. It's Pat watching Patception, because before it looked a bit like this.
Yes.
Which is what we're going to do again, because this is a pre-recorded conversation with Te Rāwhiti Bosch, who is a photographer and a Māori artist, and he's got some. His art is also in the NFT world, but he has also got concerns and worries about what's happening to Indigenous art in the NFT world. So let's have a listen to this now, and a watch of this as well, and then we'll come back and wrap up and move on to some other bits and bobs. The other thing is, if you're watching online and you want to comment as this is going through, we're happy to put up comments and stuff as these conversations are going on as well. So here's Te Rāwhiti Bosch talking about NFTs and his art. And welcome to the show, Te Rāwhiti Bosch. How are you, mate?
Kia ora, Pat. Awesome. Nice to be here.
Good morning to you. Lovely to see you this morning, and thank you for giving us a few minutes.
Sweet.
We've been talking this morning about NFTs and what they are. Professor Paul Moon put out a post on LinkedIn and his Facebook, social media, yada yada, about there being a lack of protection for Indigenous IP. Now, I saw you a few weeks ago in a story on One News talking exactly about that. You are, let's bring this up so everyone can see, you are an artist, you are a photographer, you have a thriving budget. I've spent a lot of time on your website. Your photos are amazing.
Cheers, bro.
But you've also started to dabble in the world of NFTs.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if you would just tell us your experiences of going, this site is called OpenSea, going on to OpenSea, and what you discovered from well, let's be honest, a cultural appropriation point of view when you jumped on there looking to get into it yourself.
Yeah, well, basically that sort of appropriation or stealing of IP and stuff like that, that's been happening for ages, and NFTs is just the kind of the next frontier, the next new space where it's happening. And myself as a Māori artist coming into the space, but also as, you know, one who's connected to a whole lot of other artists, and encouraging Māori artists to get in there, is, you know, knowing that we can't actually control what other people do. You know, someone else is gonna do rip-offs. It's just like, did you get the real Nikes or did you get the rip-off Ickies? Or, you know, did you get a real Nixon watch or did you get a Nonix from Malaysia? You know, those sorts of things. So that's always going to happen. But I think what's really important is educating people about how to look into a project, how to look into you know, someone who's selling NFTs, to really go, oh, well, is that their IP? Are they ripping it off? Are they doing it well? Because, you know, when I traveled overseas, there were people who had, oh, like, look at you're from New Zealand, look at my Māori tattoo. And it was nothing, like, it was ugly for one, and it had nothing to do with moko. But, you know, people are thinking, oh, yeah, I can grab that design and, you know, I can use it. It's kind of like the war bonnet story over in the States, you know?
Yeah.
Like fashion brands grabbing a headdress, a Native American headdress, thinking it's okay to use it in their ad campaign or whatever, but it's a complete
Victoria's
misappropriation. Yeah, you know,
Yeah.
and it really denigrates you know, the culture and the purpose of whatever that thing is. So it's the same with moko, applying moko to, you know, to a whole lot of different things that's not really the context, or, you know, and is it really moko? Because does it have a story, or is it just someone's ripped off and drawn a few spirals? So in the NFT space, because it's the, you know, it's the wide world, and like you alluded to, we've already seen, if you search Māori on OpenSea, which is like the trade me of NFTs, there's a whole lot of there's a whole lot of different NFTs. You can see here, like, it doesn't even look Māori, and, you know, we didn't have those weapons and anything like that. There's a whole lot of stuff, but what worried me is there was also things like you know, that those picture of tupuna Māori, so ancestors. Basically, if I went and grabbed your great grandfather's portrait and then I started selling it on as an NFT, you'd feel pretty wretched about that, eh? Like, you wouldn't be stoked. And so the other thing, I'll just, you know, talking about these ones here,
Yep, sure.
is that whole caricature and denigrating caricature thing that's always happened, you know, but quite often about native peoples. And if you look at, you know, that's a whole nother thing. You can go into the history of different cartoons and stuff, and how say native people or how Māori people were depicted in these cartoons in ways that, you know, have a look at that one on the far right.
That one?
The male Māori warrior, you know. It's, one, doesn't look anything like a male Māori warrior, and two, just looks like, you know, the boogeyman or whatever. So it's really concerning seeing those things, but you can't actually control it. So the kind of angle myself and my mates in the space are taking is, how do you educate people to know what's a real Nike versus a Icky shoe? You know, what's a real Nixon versus a non-Nix? How can you look into a project? Look at, you know, when you see a project, when you see some cool art, sure, it might be really cool art, but who made it? And those are some of the things that you can see in NFTs, is it has that whakapapa, it has that link back to who created it, has that provenance, and that's going to be an important thing, you know, going forward. I've got some personal mates, Anikaro Harawira, another fellow Wirumu Barrable, their designs, so their artwork, straight stolen off their social media and then this international company put it onto a whole bunch of duvets, pillows,
Wow.
hoodies, and then sold it through a pretend address in Australia. We know it's pretend because some mates went around to go and say, "Hey, what are you up to?" And it was just a fake address.
Some mates
So-
went around.
Yeah. So like the that stuff's happening. So theft, intellectual property theft, and just because you can't prosecute it in a court of law doesn't mean it's not wrong, eh?
Yeah.
So I think that's the biggest thing. So if you as a art collector, as an investor, if you're looking to purchase Māori art, definitely have a look into who the people are,
Mhm.
like who the creators are. There's other projects that I've heard of that say a Pākehā company would get a Māori artist to do the original art, and then they might pay them a small fee or something, and then start selling these NFTs for like heaps. And then so that's my second question: who benefits?
Right.
So who's
Follow
created
money.
it? Who benefits? Yeah, follow
Yeah.
the money, and that's
Yeah.
like anything, eh?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
you can see when people are getting exploited, and you can see when things are legit. And I think that's the biggest thing. Like look a little bit further than the image that you see on the screen. Look into who's making it, who's benefiting, why are they doing it, all those sorts of things, because that all matters.
Yeah.
When I'm looking at a project, that all matters to me anyway. I don't want to be buying from something that's exploiting people or denigrating someone else's mana.
It is interesting when you talk about exploiting people, because I think straight away that there is a huge push towards like let's avoid blood diamonds. So there's this idea out there that let's not exploit these people in this country doing this terrible job. And this is it may not be exactly the same as a 6-year-old kid down in mine, but it's on the same side of that conversation about
Exactly.
about exploitation. And I think you make a perfect talking about the headpiece in America. I think we need to go a step further. I used to work as a talkback host on ZB, and when people would talk about treaty issues and stuff, I'd always try and bring it back to make it personal to them. So if your forebears in Ireland, like mine were, had 10,000 acres of land, and the government in 1913 acquired that or borrowed that land for the war efforts, and then never gave it back. And if they had have given it back right now, you'd be worth $10 million. Would you have a problem with it? And to be honest, the people who were disingenuous would say no, and I just say you're lying. Of course you would. So if you make it into a way that they can understand, and I think your ancestors is it like saying your ancestors, like my grandfather, my great grandfather, my whatever, if that was being sold as a commodity, that perfectly identifies the issue with that side of it. What's a little bit cloudier, perhaps legally, is things like tamoko and designs that belong to an iwi, because, and I think I said this to you in the text, you change a song by 3 notes and you're not breaching legal copyright. So if there is a design that belongs to a region or a group or a family or a whānau or an iwi or whatever, and that's just changed, the lines are a bit thicker or there's a slightly different angle on it, and so technically it's not in breach of copyright, how does that work? And the last question before I let you talk is the line between appreciation, emulation, and appropriation. Like, I'm sure within Māori culture, of which I'm not a part, there must be an amount of pride when you see appreciation out there, but there must be also an amount of shock when you see appropriation out there. And where's that line?
Yeah, I think there's a guy, Louis Gong, over in the States. He's a native artist, and they've got a company called 8th Generation. And one of the lines that they were putting out, and he was quite strong about, was buy from inspired natives, not native inspired. So again, that goes back to the
brilliant.
It's beautiful. Buy from inspired Māori, not Māori inspired art. And that goes back to those 2 questions that I was talking about. So first off, who's making it? Is it an inspired native or is it native inspired? Who benefits from it? Is it some company offshore, or is it the actual people whose art form that belongs to, whose IP that is? And tamoko, because each tamoko is unique, it's not like, okay, if you did a mangopare, then that will breach copyright laws. And I'm no lawyer anyway, so I can't talk about that side. But I can tell you that if someone else is ripping off our designs, you know, for their commercial gain and has no connection to the people whose designs that came from. It doesn't sit right to me.
Yeah.
You know, that doesn't feel right. And like you said, you know, personalizing it, that those photos, I saw a blooming one of the paintings, portraits of Tamati Wakanene on there. And I'm like, first of all, is that your ancestor that you're selling? No. If it's someone else's, then what are you up to? And two, you don't even have the IP for that art. You know, those are well-established artists up there. So if someone else started grabbing my photos, those photos, and you know, started selling them, that's just theft.
Totally.
But the hard thing is with you know, like the internet and the blockchain, it's hard to prove. One, it's hard to find. Two, and it would be hard to prosecute, because what if, you know, someone in some other country had just, you know, copied photos off my website and start selling them. So I think it's less about trying to control what other people do, and it's more trying to influence people to, if you are interested, you know, because we have beautiful, our mahi toi are beautiful. They carry depth, they carry stories. That's the other thing. If you're buying from an inspired Māori, you're going to get the story, you're going to get the depth. If you're buying from Māori inspired art, then it's just a bunch of squiggles on a page. You know, it doesn't have the story, it doesn't have the whakapapa, it doesn't have the deeper connection to the land or to the culture that it came from.
Yeah.
And I think that's the big thing, you know, just educating people to be able to see deeper, so you get the real thing, because you don't want to be caught walking down the street with a pair of ickies, do you? You know, it's not that cool. It's not that cool.
Hey, dude, your photography is amazing. If people want to check it out, rawhitiroa.com, isn't it? .com? Yep, .com.
Yep.
Te Rawhitiroa. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you giving us a perspective on this. Let's say from the inside, looking out, as opposed to what all of us tend to do. So we appreciate that.
Cheers, bro. Appreciate the questions and appreciate you reaching out, bro. That's awesome.
So there you go. There is an interesting perspective from, as I said, the inside looking out.
Yeah, it's that whole thing called legislation not catching up quickly to.
Yeah. It's. I don't know how you can quite legislate against ones and zeros. I mean, to be honest with you, I agree with Tawhitiroa about what is theft and what isn't theft. It's just very hard to police, isn't it? I mean, if you steal my car and I see my car in your driveway, that's pretty easy.
Yeah, well, you know, Google Books is everybody's bloody books online. Like, that's bullshit, and that's Google. It's fucking Google.
I think the legal system is always going to be ill-equipped to, well, and probably should be ill-equipped to be involved in these conversations, right? That we can't purely, just like we can't purely, you know, commodify art. We can't legalize this conversation completely as well. We have to have it on a cultural basis.
Yeah, but you have to try. I don't know. It's like I wrote a novella of my short play that I put on Amazon, and that's on Google Books. It's just like, well, how the hell did that get there? I'm selling it for $3 on Amazon, you know.
Right.
And it's just,
yeah, that sounds pretty straightforward. Yeah, I think I was talking. Yeah, that's 50.
Yeah. Even though they could say I was appropriating Jane Austen. One thing about appropriation that's difficult for someone like me that does solo shows, because I do that because it's economical, and the way the world is sort of going, it would be that I can only ever portray a white woman, do you know? And I feel like, and actually that takes away some other voices. Like I would never, you know, like playing a Māori character, it feels very uncomfortable for me. And I know a lot of people would be. Like, say I do multi-character shows, like when my Dickens show's got 15 people in it. So yeah, or like, and if you wanted to do a drag queen, then that's problematic. But then that means there's actually less representation. But people should say it should be the people that are representing it, sure. But then, I don't know, it's a minefield. It's a minefield.
I remember, Penny, when we were doing theatre sports 412 years ago.
Are you talking about the geographical roller coaster?
One of the rules of the troupe was don't play gay camp. Like if you were going to have a character.
That's half the characters gone.
But that sort of what I was going to say. I've just watched this horrifically trashy television program, which I love, called Is It Cake? If you haven't seen it yet on Netflix,
I've watched one episode.
It's fucking amazing.
I don't know about that, but yeah, okay.
And there's a guy in that who is like if I don't know if this sounds horrible or homophobic or not, but if you were going to draw the stereotype of a gay man to the extreme, you would draw him, voice and all, everything about him. Right now, if I was to portray him, let's say I was doing a skit show, portray him in a skit show, I would have to play at camp, but then would that be homophobic? But you know, it's like we were talking about this the other day with Mukhtar's Penny, and but one of the biggest things that came out was about punching up and punching down. Because one of the things I said was, you know, I can do an Irish accent, I can do a Scottish accent, I can do a South African accent, I can do an American accent, but if I do an Asian accent, whoa.
Yeah, and you know, and I get that, and exactly. But Irish have been punched down for a long time. No dogs are Irish. But it's about it's kind of what you look like, because I've thought about this at length. And one thing we've started doing with theatre sports, or stopped doing, is the geographical roller coaster and the geographical replay. That had some of the funniest moments, but when you look back on it, they were all cheap stereotypes, particularly around the Asian characters. Like, you know, it's like, oh my God, it's just. And when I went to see the Mikado,
you've just been cancelled, Penny. Thanks for that.
Exactly. That's why I didn't do it for very long. I went to Mikado at the Court Theatre, and it was just all people going Kawasaki, Mitsubishi, and all this sort of stuff, and it was horrendous. Like I just felt so uncomfortable. So we definitely moved on from that, but it's not an easy conversation.
You know what I really think it is, and I think that there needs to be some people out there with balls to do this. And do you know what? To be honest, because I'm insignificant in this community and society, because our numbers are so small, I'm perfectly happy to have the balls to do it because I can't be cancelled. You can't cancel a nothing. And it's that if you're not doing it out of malice and if you're not punching down, you can basically do whatever you want. That's the rule. Now, if I'm there's nothing that I'm going to do, but I thought about this. I was watching another thing. It was another horrific reality show on Netflix. It was a dating show, and there was a couple of Indian, as in subcontinent, the continent of from Asia, Indian family, and the parents are born in India, and the kids were first generation out. And I knew that the parents would have an accent, and I knew, based on a lot of Indians that I've known and grown up with through the years, that the family would be incredibly happy if their Indian son connected with an Indian daughter. Their ancestry would be the same. And I said something like, I can just imagine them going home and go, oh, you found yourself a very nice Indian girl. And you know what? It's exactly what the parents said when they came home and they joined each other. And I wasn't saying it in a context of mocking, but because I did the voice, I had this thought, can I do that on the show? I've just done it on the show. But
it was very good, Pat.
It was accurate. But that's the other thing. I'm a very good mimic, and I'm very good at doing accents. I have been all the way through. And it was accurate, and it wasn't mocking them. It was actually acknowledging what they were going to do and what they were going to say.
I know that whole thing that you just, you know, it's like, because that new movie, Disney movie, Turning Red, which is bloody marvelous, and it's got some very hilarious jokes about Asian parent stereotypes, but because it's been made by Asians, you know, it's like, we just can't now. And I really don't think we can. We just can't. I can make jokes about epileptics, but if you try and make jokes about epileptics, it's about being mean, because I'm epileptic.
No, I don't agree with you. I could make jokes about epileptics and wouldn't be seen as a big deal. There might be a very, very, very subset of subsections of the community that might try something, but compared to making jokes about a culture, it's nothing the same. It's not the same at all.
You say that to somebody who's epileptic. Do you know what I mean? It's like everybody's got their thing. So that's, you know, somebody who's having lots of seizures and someone's all like, at them, you know, like this sort of shit, which happens.
Yeah, that would be the definition of punching down. You're basically mocking them.
And it's so true, but the only people that can really define what's punching up or down are the people themselves. And that's absolutely.
But punching up or punching down is also intention. Like if I'm and look, this is it's so sort of nuanced, this conversation. There's nothing that I can think about that I would do. So I'm very much approaching this from a theoretical point of view.
Yeah, but I don't know. Anyway, I just think it's easy for you to do that because you're not part of, you know, you've got things that maybe you've been attacked for, what have you, that are about you. So I'm cutting across you. But it's just like, yeah, because I don't think it's up to us to decide what other communities can be offended by.
But but no one else can tell me my intention, and the intention is the punching up or punching down.
Yes, but no one else can tell you. You can't define for other people how they react to what you've said.
But then you'd never say anything ever about anything at any stage.
that's rubbish, because not everything you say is going to offend people or upset people or make people feel diminished.
Well, anytime you offer an opinion, it could. And that's sort of what we do.
Yes, which is why it can be a fraught endeavor.
Well, it's a fraught endeavor if you buy into it completely. And look, I mean, you know me, Penny, George, you're getting to know me. I'm not someone who goes out to overtly hurt or harm people. But when you offer an opinion on something, you're going to use whatever word you want: upset, offend, belittle. Some people are going to feel that way. My point is, if you feel that way, doesn't necessarily mean I've done that, because sometimes feelings can be wrong. And then you'll get other people within that community who don't feel that way, which means to one sector of that society you haven't done it, to another sector of that group you have done it. So then what do you do?
No, that's up there with, like, I'm apologizing for the way you've decided to feel about what I've said, which is always a bogus apology.
Because I'm not saying one can't be offended by something I say. What I'm saying is, if one is offended, it doesn't necessarily mean what I've said is offensive. I mean, there is a separate, because if the person who has exactly the same life experience and world as you and exactly the same person is not offended by what I say, then what do? Do I err on the side of not saying anything to make sure that person won't be offended when that one is, or vice versa, or what?
I just think that you can have a bit more of a consideration about what you say when you give an opinion that isn't necessarily going to be causing someone harm. That's, and this is why one thing I will say is I do get sick of a lack of nuance around any conversation. Like, so if you have anything about, I can maybe understand how sometimes women want their own space. You're a TERF, even though that's not true, so, I'm happily, I'm not transphobic in any way, shape or form, but as soon as anybody says anything like that, then they're cancelled. Yeah. So I find that frustrating. But
you're just echoing what I've said. Because the thing is, as soon as you go into nuance and you don't go black and white, you're offending someone somewhere. That's the whole point I'm making.
I will make an effort not to do that. But if I do that inadvertently, I will learn from it, and I shouldn't be cancelled in that process.
And I think actually you and I are actually saying something quite similar, just from a different perspective, because I think that actually the example you've just given is exactly that. So, for example, within that world, and we're not going to get into this conversation today, but there are some people who mention something that's accurate within the realm of science, and another sector of society finds that transphobic or degrading or whatever. So does that mean they don't mention the thing that's accurate within science to not offend those people, or do they mention the thing that's accurate within science? What if they're a scientist and that's what they're studying? So that's what I'm saying. Just because someone's offended by something, and I'm not doing this as a coverall. I'm not saying I don't care if you're offended. I'm just saying if someone is offended by something, doesn't necessarily mean what's said is offensive. It might be true and accurate.
We were talking about primarily as jokes, though, right? Too.
Yeah, sure.
That's a whole different situation. Like when you're just mining it for jokes on stage, like, Jimmy Carr, some of that shit that he did in his new stand-up special, I find revolting. So
I don't know if I've seen it yet, but he's a setup. What is he? Setup hit down. He's like the one-liner joke.
He's got some very funny shit, but he's got some really mean. Like Ricky Gervais's last season had so much horrible shit in it about fat people laughing at fat people. Look at you and your ugly face. And I just was like, I don't want to watch this. This is just endless punching down. And then people can say it's freedom of speech if you want to segue into the next one, but I just I don't know. I just don't want to make people feel shit about themselves.
So here's the question. If you had something for you personally, I don't even know what it is, it doesn't matter, this is hypothetical, that was quite important and you were quite passionate about and you believed in strongly, but you knew that talking about it and sharing it would make a small sector of the community feel shit, would you then just bottle it up and not say anything? Or would you share it understanding that the majority of people, it's going to be helpful to hear this, even though it's upsetting a small group of people?
I mean, that's such a wild hypothetical. I need to have specifics about that. Yes. I did do a piece. I got hit on once in my sleep and I did a song about it. It was just
hit on in your sleep.
I got hit on in my sleep by someone I'd never met in my life. I woke up with someone kissing me who I'd never met in my life. So I turned some material about something that happened to me and sang a song about it called I'll Be Your Rohypnol Girl. And I did it, but and you know what? And the mood has somewhat changed. Because I did that not long ago. And this woman emailed me in outrage because her girlfriend had the same thing. And how dare I make jokes about it? And I'm like, well, that's something that happened to me. like, and I've turned that on its head. But that, so that was something that, yes, I wanted to talk about that, but it offended somebody else. But if I hadn't gone through it, then absolutely fuck off. But because I had, yeah.
But
anyway,
but if that's the yardstick, if it's a controversial issue in society, anyone can attach the I'm going through it. No, I'm not saying as tangibly as yours, but I'm going through this now because this is a part of the society I live in and it's impacting me. I think if what you're saying is if you can own it, you can talk about it, I kind of think, well, that's almost anything.
Except it's not. Like an Asian person sitting listening to people going around going, oh, that's a bushy Toyota. And I saw somebody in a show once, they were going like this, playing an Asian person. That's bullshit. And that's
but I think we all agree that that's bullshit. So
yeah,
that's not what I'm talking about. Because
this is what I'm talking about for you, but this would be the same for somebody else with the same issue.
Yeah.
I feel like in the conversation with Magdez Azamandi the other day, we were trying to sort of depersonalize it and de-individualize it and think of it as a political issue, as an issue of power, and that's when it's problematic, right? Is when it sort of reflects power imbalances in society, right? It's not necessarily an individual level of offense or anything like that, but when it backs up power imbalances or power dynamics, power relations in society, historical oppression, repression, whatever it is, then that's when it's maybe important to sort of double check. Yeah.
Well, just like for me, when I started doing comedy, I got introduced constantly as a slut, endless slut shaming, and then that really, and at the time I didn't really sort of think about, I was, it's so funny how you get further down the line and go, oh, that was bullshit when I got introduced as this next woman bathes in cum. Please welcome Penny Ashton. You just kind of go, oh, ha, 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 but then you feel like shit. And that is enforcing the gender imbalance that women aren't funny, shouldn't be here, etc. So, that's me supposedly, oh, isn't that funny? But no, that's bullshit. And you've just made me feel like shit before I sit on a stage and try and make people laugh, So anyway.
Let's actually just very quickly, we're not going to touch on this for long. And it was something we necessarily weren't going to talk about today. We were going to give it more time, but let's talk about it now before we do. Elon Musk tweeting out, given that Twitter serves as the de facto public town square, failing to adhere to free speech principles fundamentally undermines democracy. He's also said free speech is essential to a functioning democracy. Do you believe Twitter rigorously adheres to this principle? Is a new platform needed? And that's blown up into Elon Musk should buy Twitter. That's blown up into Elon Musk should launch something new. And I guess, I understand his point and position. I think that at the moment, if I was to err on the side of free speech or safe speech, I err on the side of free speech. But I also, as I've said today, and those people who know me know that I'm also not about hurting people's feelings and offending them. So there's always that, as you said before, Penny, nuance and what we do with it. This was something we were going to touch on today. It's in our thumbnail, so we better mention it before we go on to wrap up with some sad news. Do you guys want to talk to the kind of, I do like the idea that who gives a fuck about Twitter because it's not a real place, but it is sort of turned into the town square. And there are, and you mentioned the term cancelling before, Penny, Twitter seems to be the fertile soil of the cancel culture, if there is such thing, or the cancelling of people for doing or saying the wrong thing even decades ago. But what do you guys reckon?
I will just, it's such, because, so a couple of days ago, she called herself a fat activist, a fat academic, and that's what she called herself, Kat Pausay. She died in her sleep, and she was quite overweight, which was her whole PhD in academia, etc. And she was a bloody delight. She came to see my show in Palmerston North. She was just a sweetheart, so lovely and funny. And oh my God, the trolls that came out on Twitter to rejoice at her death were just abhorrent. Like I'm generally, I like to think I'm not often that shocked, but I was shocked. It's like this woman has died and these fuckers are going, oh, look at this fat lady. I want, and much more horrible things. But then a whole lot of other women were yelling at, because it was all men. And all these other women were just telling all of these men to fuck off. And then they got Twitter bans for using the word fuck too much. So you know what I mean? Like, but I can see with things like that, and they were not policed in any way, and they were vile, and they were piling on a dead woman. So sometimes I think Twitter doesn't need to have any more freedom of speech.
Yeah, the policing and principles don't seem to even really work. They're so inconsistent if you look at the guidelines for YouTube. So I don't know what Elon Musk's genius idea would be to bring in guidelines that would somehow promote freedom of speech. I'm sure there would still have to be some sort of restriction. In fact, I'd be terrified to be if Twitter was owned by Elon Musk.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? I got banned from Facebook because I said chink in the armor. And somebody asked me if I was marrying Jacinda, and I said, if I told you, I'd have to kill you, and then got banned for that as well. Yeah. So they're lacking nuance. They're lacking idioms, for fuck's sake. Put some idioms in your algorithms, Facebook. Yeah.
How is there any conversation, and I'm allowed to talk about this because I'm fat. Is there any conversation here about that you're allowed to have? This is a genuine question about how her obesity added to her death. Is that a conversation that's allowed to be had in this current climate we live in?
It's a difficult one, but it's certainly not to be had on the day that she dies. Do you know what I mean?
And the punching up, punching down thing as well, yeah. Like speaking literally from experience, 12 kgs heavier than I was a month ago, and having and wanting to see grandkids and that kind of stuff. I think I can speak to the ideas around fat people dying young, and the pressure that it puts on people's bodies and that kind of stuff as well. I would never abuse. In fact, it's nothing but tragic and sad. It's even like those anti-vaxxers who are dying of COVID. It's tragic and sad, although they've made decisions to bring that on themselves. It's like any person having a shortened life for any situation around their own body that potentially could be changed. I'm not saying everyone who's fat can just lose weight. And look, I'm closer to 50 than 40. I'm the person to talk to about how that's not always achievable. But if someone, I don't know, I was scrolling through this trying to find out how old she was. Do you know how old she was?
She's 42. I think she's 42.
Yeah, well, see, that's far too young.
Yeah, I mean, but the thing is, some gross little fucker on Twitter saying some really vile things about her is not, that. That's not that.
I agree with you. I agree with you. So at what point can we then go, a 42-year-old should not be dying in their sleep? And if morbid obesity plays a part, when do we have that conversation?
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is like I just feel like Twitter is such a toxic place. It's not the place for it.
So where is and when is, in theory?
With your doctor and in medical journals and publishing of health news and things like that.
Yeah, but in saying that, for stuff we want to look, I'm not disagreeing with you, Pina. This is a genuine conversation. I struggle with that answer, because if we want to put out stuff that we want to support, be it about our own social issues or whatever, Twitter is a perfectly valid place to put it and have that conversation. But because this feels like it's maybe more sensitive and delicate, it's not the place to have it. I don't know if I buy that.
Well, I just don't think the day that she died is the place.
Well, that's fine. I'm with you. That's why I said when and where.
And you don't necessarily even have to, I don't know, just when she was quite beloved, she had a big fan base and people were mourning, and then all these fuckers piled in. It's just like,
I'm with you. I'm with you. No, look, you got no argument out of me about time and place for that.
And the segue to, I'm not a Foo Fighters fan. I cannot name you one of their songs, but, this is a tragic case of somebody who is fallen for his own health foibles. His heart was twice its normal size. He had 10 different toxic items in his blood, including heroin and marijuana, etc., etc. So would you be happy with people, on Twitter on that day talking about how he's brought it on himself?
I'm sure there was plenty of them. I do also want to say that I think those haven't all been released yet. There's a little bit of allegedly in there. We haven't had the full toxicology and that kind of stuff at the moment. There's a little bit of controversy in there, but I think it's pretty safe to assume that someone who's OD'd before, if you watch their documentary, people out there back and forth, fantastic documentary. Everyone should watch it, even if you're not a fan, Penny, because it shows the creative process of Dave Grohl getting over Nirvana, starting a new band and moving forward. So even though it's a Foo Fighters documentary, it really is more about the creative process than about their music. And they talk about him ODing in that, and I think it was in Rome at one stage. So that's obviously it's a pretty fair guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And they said his heart was twice its normal size, etc. And I hasten to add that I'm not obviously, happy about this in any way. And I just feel so sorry for Dave Grohl. Also, his wife and 3 children. But Dave Grohl, good Lord, this man's been through so much.
Yeah.
And just everybody there. And it is so tragic. I like the East Pointers. They were a band that somebody, what was his name? Cody Chasen. He just died. But then they thought that maybe he'd committed suicide, but then it came out that he had a heart attack. So yeah.
Dave Grohl wrote in his book about Taylor Hawkins that basically as soon as he met him backstage, he fell in love with him.
Oh.
So they were like, best of mates. I'm not sure of the relationship between Dave Grohl and I think you hate it when a name jumps out of your head. The lead singer of Nirvana,
Kurt Cobain.
I don't know how close they were, but the way he talks about Taylor Hawkins here is like my best friend forevermore. And I actually don't know how it's a silly thing to say because I don't have that sort of vibe of musician and performer in me necessarily, but I don't know how I almost don't know how you'd continue. This is the last time they played together, and this is Dave talking about Taylor Hawkins on stage.
Hold on. There's one more person you can't forget. Ladies and gentlemen. Hawkins plays the drums and the Foo Fighters all the time. Taylor, do you love it?
Fucking love playing big fucking huge stadiums in Buenos Aires.
It's pretty fun.
So we can leave that down. I know it sounds silly just being a fan of a band, but and you're right, Penny. The wife and kids are the most important, but I'm just heartbroken for the whole thing. It's like my kids know Foo Fighters because I play them probably once a week. I go through the 10 greatest songs and jump around the house and that kind of stuff. And there's been some moments where some people have died, and he's one of them. And it's just
don't apologize for it, man. Like, we love these people. These people are in our lives. I was really sad when Betty White died. I was sad when George Michael died. I was so sad when I loved George Michael, which was a futile exercise. But in 1987, I was completely in love. And when I read that on my phone, I clutched my husband's chest and just went, this is a visceral, it's a loss. It's a loss because you appreciate their talent, which was obviously immense, obviously not for me, but for you. So just no need to apologize.
And he's 50, or he was 50. It's like
bullshit.
And I think it is a really good time. I mean, what was I watching? I follow, I don't know if you know him, but Bert Kreischer, the comedian. I mean, being in the comedian world, you may or may not know him. And I was watching him. He's doing like a tour at the moment, and I was watching him. They've got some video from his tour with them all in the bus, and I just saw him and 3 of his, colleagues who they were touring with, is just drinking and partying and going from town to town in the big bus. And I go, you can just see how that lifestyle just completely screams another night on the bus, another night or for these guys, another night on our jet or whatever. Bit bored, let's stick something up our nose, or let's make this show. And we all know stories about bands who get a bit bored from playing the same 15, 20 songs over again. So the next night they go on with a glass of vodka, and 2 nights later it's a bottle of vodka, and 3 nights later they've already had a bottle of vodka and they take a bottle with them on stage because they're trying to, what we look and see as absolute, the dream lifestyle and that kind of stuff. They get bored. And Penny, it's one of the things I loved about theatre sports is it was different every night. I couldn't do, well, I don't have the skill to do, but I couldn't do what you do with a scripted piece, even if it was mine. The things, I found any run I ever did in theatre of a scripted piece, I'd be like finding ways to make it more interesting for me on day 13.
And that's
theatre sports is different every night. And so I can imagine these bands, I mean, these guys have been together since the late 90s, will be playing some of the same songs on stage that night that they would have probably the day they got together.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
Yeah. I mean, like, I always try to have different moments in my shows with audience participation and stuff like that. But like, there's a song that I do in Olive Copperbottom that is a Chopin number that I've added words to about going north and going south. And I love doing that. I love doing it. I love the feeling of singing these really big notes and stuff. And I'm sure that they have similar moments in each song, or a particular song that they love, that they look forward to doing, etc. So I'm sure they had moments like that too. And if not, they need to get out.
So yeah, look, I mean, there's an interesting connection you make between the fat activist and there won't be any hate towards Taylor Hawkins, who's probably killed himself with drugs, leaving his family behind today.
Yep.
And obviously there is vitriol towards the fat activist, but on both of those things, I still come back to that idea as when is the time to talk about it. And because I agree with you about trolls jumping online the day someone dies. I agree with you, but all too often we're told in society this is not the time to talk about it, and then we never talk about it. I mean, the classic example is the NRA when a shooting happens in America, and they go, "Well, we're not talking about it today," and then of course 6 months later, it's in the distant memory, and we never talk about it. So, you know, I'll keep talking about it because I've lost 12 kilos in a month, and I'll keep telling people about that as well.
So you've lost 12 kilos in a month?
Yeah.
Well done, dude. I thought you said you put it on. No, that's much better. Well done.
Yeah. No. 12 kilos down in a month, and I'll keep doing that. And for me, it's probably middle of next year before I'm finished doing it. But so that's why I think I can speak to it.
That's so much. What did you?
It might be more like 6 weeks, 6 or 7 weeks, not a month.
Phenomenal amounts of weight to, because it is hard. Like, I've been on Jenny Craig numerous times. I'm actually on epilepsy medication that made me hungry for a long time, and I didn't put 2 and 2 together. So that's why I was hungry. So I know what it is to try and lose weight when you can't, and it's really hard. And a lot of really skinny people just have no concept of how hard it can be. So well done to you.
People also don't understand, and I'm not saying I can speak to poor old Taylor, but people also don't understand that if you are significantly, massively overweight, you probably have a food addiction. And the most difficult thing about a food addiction is that if you're addicted to heroin or alcohol or marijuana or porn or whatever else, you actually can cut that out of your life and you don't need it to survive. The most difficult thing about a food addiction is you need to keep consuming the thing you're addicted to or you will die. There's not really any other addiction in the world where if you give up the thing you're addicted to, you will then literally die. Yeah. Food addiction is one of those things. And I've done this my whole life, and I've been yo-yo dieting, and I've lost weight and I've gained weight and I've lost weight and I've gained weight. So I haven't really talked about it. This is the first time I've talked about it, Penny, to be honest with you. And it's not something I'm going to shout from the rooftops, because there's a part of me that's gone, I've done this 20 times in my life and I've failed every time, because if I hadn't failed every time, I'd be at a healthy and correct weight, which I'm not. So that means I failed every time. And so I haven't really blogged about it or publicized about it or whatever until now. But I guess in looking at what we're talking about today, I think I've got something to add to this conversation. We get back to who gets to talk about it. We come right back to the conversation, full circle.
Can I just say that alcoholics, if they do stop drinking, that they should be really careful, because they can die if they stop drinking. But
what I'm saying is, alcohol doesn't need to be a part of their life forevermore. I get it that if you come off it straight away, it can be harmful, but it's not something that in 20 years' time they need.
It's not sustenance, right? Yeah, you don't need. It's not like water or air.
Yeah. You just have to, that's the thing, you go on diets, but that's not what you need to be on a diet forever, a specific way of eating forever. So that's the change.
I'm just looking at these photos of Taylor, poor old Taylor. I'm so sad. And I'm sad for him. I mean, I guess we should be mostly sad for his family and his kids, which is true. But like you, Penny, I think poor old Dave Grohl and what he's been through, his first great musical love, put a shotgun in his mouth. His second one potentially overdosed. After he'd overdosed before.
Yeah.
And so this was the second time. And
there's, what was it, Heath Ledger? Just these accidental overdoses, it seems, it's just so heartbreaking. And I watched Dope Sick recently on Apple, which is all about OxyContin, which is infuriating, but so worth watching if you've got access to. I think it was at Disney Plus. On Disney Plus, watch Dope Sick. It was and Michael Keaton, he's so good in it. So it's really worth seeing.
I think we should wrap up now, guys. This has been an interesting conversation. Hopefully people learned a bit about NFTs today. And I guess then we got a chance to talk a bit about, gosh, that kind of just flowed into flow, didn't it? And then we came to an end. Anything else? You're talking about your shows and stuff, Penny. I saw a Facebook post by you the other day saying something like, "So it begins." Are you planning something new? Are you getting into a new show, or you're writing something new or something?
It's me watching Bridgerton on Netflix.
So it's the beginning of a binge of it.
Yeah, and which I've got one episode left in 3 days. I've watched all of it. Yeah, so Bridgerton it's so funny. Like, I love period dramas. I just do. But I am starting to write a Shakespeare show. And I'm thinking of doing Shakespeare mashed up with Bake Off. So it's things like What Man Through Yonder Window Bakes and stuff like that. So
that'd be Shake Off. Eh?
Yes. Yeah, like maybe Bridgerton is on Netflix, and they often have popular music that they've set to like chamber music styles, which is what I've always wanted to do, but I don't have the same money as Netflix. So that's why I always do old music and add words to it. But yeah, like some Taylor Swift, Bake It Off, etc. would be quite helpful.
There's a TikTok account where it's a girl's TikTok account. I don't know how to find it. People could look it up though. And it's "My dad will play any music you want as a wedding march." And I saw them do the theme to The Office, and he plays it like the theme to The Office, and it sounds like a wedding march. It's pretty amazing, actually. People should look it up.
Describe TikTok well as it's like watching a headache.
Watching a headache going blam, 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 blam as well. All right, team. I think we're done for today. If you've joined in with us, thanks. There's a lot of chats going on there, so we haven't had a chance to get to all of them. But thanks for your input from watching on the sidelines, and thanks for joining us today. Remember to share our shit. Penny, thanks for jumping in today and co-hosting with us. We appreciate it. And George, thanks for all the work you do behind the scenes, as well as the commentary you add. And other than that, guys, I think we should just fuck off for lunch. That's what I'm feeling like doing.
Okay.
All right, team. See you later. Catch you tomorrow.